Excellencias.
Your Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I call to order the 7th meeting of the 61st session of the Human Rights Council. We will continue with our meetings as part of the high-level segment. I therefore have the offer to give the floor to Vidmantas Verbickas, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania.
Mr. President, Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, I take the floor today with a strong sense that universality and indivisibility of human rights and fundamental freedoms are unprecedented challenges in every region. Here, at the United Nations principal body for the promotion and protection of human rights, we gather to exercise our collective responsibility to uphold and reinforce these universal values. Our ability to find common ground and act decisively has a direct impact on millions of people, on their right to live, their safety and dignity. Yet, we must also acknowledge a sobering reality. Some states are not interested in peace, nor in respect for human rights. Yesterday, we commemorated the 4th anniversary of Russia's unprovoked and illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. For 4 years, Russia continues its imperialistic war in complete disregard for international law, committing war crimes and crimes against humanity. For 4 years, Russia is deliberately and systematically torturing and killing civilians, including children and prisoners of war. For 4 years, Ukrainian children, forcibly transferred and deported by Russia, are subjected to systematic indoctrination and militarization with a genocidal aim to erase their national identity. All of this is being carried out by a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, tasked with maintaining global peace and security. There can be no just, lasting and sustainable peace without full accountability for Russia's political and military leadership for international crimes. In this regard, we encourage states to support the Special Tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine. Excellencies, as confirmed by United Nations Special Rapporteur on the human rights situation in Russian Federation, repressions at home goes hand in hand with aggression abroad. Politically motivated persecutions, pervasive censorship, and widespread disinformation are used to silence any remaining dissent and mobilize support for war. The disproportionate mobilization of ethnic and religious minorities reflects deep-rooted discrimination, while freedoms of expression, assembly and religion or belief are systematically suppressed. Another example of massive and systematic human rights violations, some amounting to crimes against humanity, is Belarus. The meticulous eradication of civil society, politically motivated convictions leading to appalling conditions of detention, and the systematic use of torture, including sexual and gender-based violence, continue unabated. Political prisoners are exploited as bargaining chips in negotiations for international economic and political consciousness. Alongside brutal repressions against Belarusians, Lukashenko also willingly continues to enable Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Lithuania has referred the situation in Belarus to the International Criminal Court concerning crimes against humanity and invites other states to join our referral. Distinguished colleagues, multilateralism and universally agreed human rights standards are facing a growing pushback. Principles that are indispensable for peace, security, freedom, and prosperity are increasingly questioned or disregarded. We must take this seriously. In the 21st century, millions of women and girls continue to face discrimination and violence. The extremely alarming human rights situation in Afghanistan, amounting to gender persecution, is yet another stark example of devastating consequences of excluding women and girls from society. Lithuania also reiterates its concerns about the very serious human rights situation in China, especially in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Inner Mongolia, and Tibet. As indicated by the UNHCR, the extent of arbitrary and discriminatory detentions of Uyghurs and other members of predominantly Muslim groups may amount to crimes against humanity. The ongoing human rights crisis in Myanmar, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Iran, Cuba, and elsewhere further remind us that efforts to protect and promote universal human rights must be strengthened. The international community has a collective responsibility to restore the credibility of international law and to combat impunities for its violations. Dear colleagues, Lithuania has always been committed to upholding the universality, indivisibility, interdependence, and interrelatedness of all human rights. We are firmly convinced that there is no path to peace, security, and prosperity without full respect for human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. In this spirit, I am proud to announce Lithuania's candidacy for membership in the Human Rights Council for the years 2028-2030. Lithuania will be a principled, constructive, and reliable partner, defending the integrity of the Council, supporting independent human rights mechanisms, and giving a strong voice to those whose rights are violated or denied. Thank you. Have a good day.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I would now like to call to the podium Her Excellency Nevena Jovanovic, State Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Serbia. You have the floor, Madam.
Honorable Mr. Vice President, Madam Assistant Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to address on behalf of the Republic of Serbia the high-level segment on the Human Rights Council. At a time of profound global uncertainty, when the credibility of multilateralism and our collective commitment to human rights are being tested, the clarity of the principles and consistency of the actions are more important than ever. Respect for international law and the sovereign equality of independent states remains a cornerstone of stability in international relations. Above all, these principles serve to safeguard the dignity, security, and the rights of every human being. Serbia remains fully committed to multilateralism as the most effective framework for addressing shared global challenges and advancing the protection of human rights. In a time of rapid global change, international institutions and organizations should continue to adapt in order to respond effectively to contemporary challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, this year marks the 25th anniversary of the Durban Declaration, a global framework for combating racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and all forms of intolerance. This milestone is not only an occasion for reflection, but a call for renewed determination to confront discrimination in all its manifestations and to build societies in which diversity is a source of strength rather than division. The Republic of Serbia remains firmly committed to promoting and protecting human rights at national level. We continue to strengthen our institutional and legislative frameworks, enhance mechanisms for protection against discrimination, and devote particular attention to vulnerable groups, including children, women, persons with disabilities, refugees, internally displaced persons, and national minorities. Gender equality is among the key priorities of our public policies. We stay dedicated to preventing violence against women, advancing their economic empowerment, and ensuring their full and equal participation in public and political life. Serbia remains a reliable partner of international human rights mechanisms and actively cooperates with all relevant bodies in implementing its commitments. Positioned at the crossroads of the regions and as a candidate country for membership in the European Union, firmly committed to its European path and the values that underpin it, Serbia seeks to act as a bridge, encouraging dialogue, cooperation, and mutual understanding. Ladies and gentlemen, when discussing the protection of human rights, we cannot overlook the situation in Kosovo and Metohija, which remains one of the most sensitive issues for my country and an important matter for the international community. Serbian population in Kosovo and Metohija continue to face long-standing challenges in the exercise of fundamental rights. Security, freedom of movement, access to institutions, protection of property, and the preservation of cultural and religious heritage remain areas of serious concern. Particularly worrying is the extremely low rate of sustainable return of internally displaced persons. Only 1.9% of more than 200,000 displaced Serbs, one of the lowest globally for decades. At the same time, ethnically motivated incidents, institutional pressures, and administrative measures affecting the daily lives of the Serbian populations continue to be documented by concern by relevant international actors. From 2021, more than 600 ethnically motivated incidents were recorded, including those involving children. Attacks on religious and cultural sites are especially concerning as they undermine the right of the Serbian population to preserve their identity and heritage, which constitutes an inseparable part of the world's cultural legacy. We call for stronger engagement by the international community and for the full implementation of undertaken obligations in a good faith. The international presence in Kosovo and Metohija remains essential for preserving peace, stability, and the protection of the human rights of Serbian and other non-Albanian communities, and it is important that it continues to operate in accordance with its mandate. Ladies and gentlemen, human rights are not an abstract concept. They are measured by people's everyday life, their security, dignity, and their ability to live free from any kind of discrimination. Serbia remains committed to building a secure, stable, and just future through dialogue, cooperation, and consistent respect for international law. At a time of global divisions, our shared responsibility is to defend the universality of human rights, strengthen trust in the international order, and consistently uphold the principle on which it rests. Because only in a world in which the rights of all are equally protected can ensure lasting peace, stability, and trust among nations. I thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to His Excellency Festus Katuna Mbandeka, Attorney General of Namibia. Please come up to the podium, sir.
Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I wish to congratulate the President on his election as President of the Human Rights Council for 2026. I further extend warm congratulations to the members of the Bureau, and I wish to thank the High Commissioner and the Secretariat for their hard work in facilitating the session of Council. Mr. Vice President, Namibia is committed to promoting and protecting human rights. In 2025, Namibia ratified the International Labour Organization Convention 190 on sexual harassment and ILO Convention 156 on workers with families and responsibilities. Namibia will present its national report to the working group of the Universal Periodic Review later this year. Mr. Vice President, Namibia conducted its population census in 2023, and its population has increased from 2.1 in 2011 to about 3 million in 2023. In 2024 and 2025, Namibia held peaceful and fair elections for the President and National Assembly and for the Regional Council and local authorities, respectively. As a champion for gender equality, about 57% of the Namibian cabinet are women, and the top 3 positions in government are occupied by women, which is a commitment to the Beijing Declaration and Program of Action. Namibia continues to be marred by incidents of gender-based violence and sexual violence, and despite sufficient legislative framework on these issues, social and behavioral factors inhibits effective implementation of these laws and policies. Namibia has established special courts to deal with gender-based violence offenses across the country to provide a victim-friendly environment. In efforts to foster a safe society, Namibia has created a gender-based violence prevention program in school curricula, among other initiatives. Namibia government continues to conduct awareness campaigns on positive gender roles and elimination of harmful cultural practices. Mr. Vice President, to improve the livelihood of its citizens, Namibia has developed a social protection system which consists of social grants, occupational and state pensions. The social assistance consists largely of universal benefits for the elderly, persons with disability, persons with albinism, several child welfare grants, and the war veterans' pension and financial assistance. In 2025, the government implemented the minimum wage for employees such as domestic, agriculture, and security workers. To address food security, the government has increased the frequency of food distribution to the marginalized communities. Mr. Vice President, Namibia reaffirms its commitments to the protection and promotion of rights of persons with disability. Misconceptions around disabilities contributes to the discrimination and stigmatization of persons with disability. Therefore, states must reinforce targeted measures to address the persistent issues, reaffirming the rights of persons with disabilities. Consequently, Namibia amended the National Disability Council Act and developed the National Disability Policy of 2025 to enhance the protection and inclusion of rights of persons with disability. Namibia prioritized equitable and inclusive quality education to achieve Goal 4 of the UN SDG by 2023. As from 2026, the government have started to provide subsidized tertiary education to enhance access to tertiary education. The school curricula continues to incorporate human rights education at all levels to promote respect for human rights and tolerance. Mr. Vice President, to further address poverty and youth unemployment, government has taken measures to promote sustainable and economic development. In 2025, Namibia launched its sixth National Development Plan, NDP 6. Namibia has committed to using employment impact assessment for job creation, an initiative launched under the UN Global Accelerator on Jobs and Social Protection. Furthermore, government has established a National Youth Development Fund to support business projects by the youth. Mr. Vice President, global tension threatens multilateralism and international law. International cooperation and solidarity remains the only tool with which states address global problems in efforts to promote and protect human rights. Climate change is a shared challenge, and we must cooperate to address its devastating impact and prevent any further damage to the climate for the benefit of the present and future generations. The International Court of Justice have confirmed the legal obligation of states in respect of climate change and their consequences, including the principle of common but differentiated responsibility. Namibia calls for the renewed commitment to multilateralism to deal with climate change, which threatens our very existence. Namibia reiterates its unwavering support for the right to self-determination of people of Palestine and calls for an end to the illegal occupation and ongoing carnage in the occupied territories. We further support the plight of the Sahrawi people of the Western Sahara in their fight for self-determination. Mr. Vice President, the universal coercive measures are illegal and aggravate pre-existing adversities that impact on human rights. We therefore continue to call for the removal of all illegal sanctions against the state of Cuba and Zimbabwe, as well as Venezuela. In the UN Charter was developed to ensure a world free from war, yet states' action threaten its core principles and objectives. Namibia calls on the international community to respect the principle of state sovereignty and to resolve all disputes through peaceful means. In closing, I reaffirm Namibia's commitment to human rights. Global challenges can only be addressed through international cooperation and multilateralism. Both requires individual commitment to the international legal order towards a common peace, towards a common goal of maintaining peace. I thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. This was the last speaker on our list for the high-level segment of this session of Council. We will now have a short technical break and will then move on to the general segment when we resume.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, we shall now begin with the general segment. Let me remind you that the speaking time limit for the general segment is 3 minutes for members and 2 minutes for observers. I wish also to recall that the list of speakers is subject to changes and the updated version is available on HRC extranet. I encourage delegations to check the list regularly and ensure that they are in the room on time for their statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bulgaria.
Thank you. Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I'm honored to address the United Nations Human Rights Council. Let me congratulate His Excellency Ambassador Suryo Dipuru of Indonesia on assuming the presidency of the Council. We wish him and the current HRC Bureau every success in their work. We reaffirm the importance of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights as a fundamental pillar of the UN system. We reiterate the need to preserve its independence, integrity and sustainability, as well as the effectiveness of the HRC mechanisms and the human rights treaty bodies. The HRC's 20th anniversary is a good occasion to reflect on the undeniable achievements, address the current challenges and further enhance the work of the Council. Mr. President, yesterday the world marked 4 years since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. We reiterate our strongest condemnation of all violations of the human rights committed in the course of Russia's aggression. The human rights situation in Ukraine should stay high on the Council's agenda. Mr. President, As a member of the HRC, Bulgaria engages in all activities of the Council and encourages genuine dialogue among the member states. During its mandate, Bulgaria upholds the culture of peace, tolerance, understanding, respect for cultural diversity, inter-religious dialogue, as well as the equality between women and men. We appreciate that the consideration of Bulgaria's national report at the 50th session of the Working Group on Universal Periodic Review on the 6th of November 25 was constructive and fruitful. We are grateful to those member states which provided us with their assessment and recommendations. Bulgaria encourages all member states to engage in the work of the Intergovernmental Open-Ended Working Group, exploring the possibility of an optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child in order to strengthen the right to free education. We follow attentively the activity of the independent experts, special procedures and investigative bodies mandated by the HRC. Their task to respond to serious violations of human rights requires respect to all stakeholders as well as independence, transparency, neutrality, impartiality and credibility. The expert assessments, fact-finding reports and public statements should meet unequivocally these high criteria. These requirements are valid, including with respect to the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Palestinian territories occupied since 1967. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate Bulgaria's commitment to further contribute to the promotion of the universal respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Mexico.
Thank you, President. The Human Rights Council has reached its 20th anniversary at a moment which is very complex, hallmarked by conflict, inequality, climate crisis, and lack of trust in multilateral institutions. Today, more than ever, human rights must be the North Star guiding our collective decisions. Human rights are not an abstract aspiration, nor are they simply rhetoric, speechifying. They're an ethical, political, social commitment which is built on a daily basis from the ground up and with the participation of the people. They underpin peace, justice, and a truly sustainable development. We must combat poverty, and we must consolidate a society which is based on respect, on the rule of law, and the rejection of violence. In Mexico, we've put in place effective strategies, for example, the program Yes to Disarmament, Yes to Peace, which promotes voluntary handing over of weapons, as well as a protection mechanism for defenders and journalists. The guiding principle of our government is very clear. We want to build a country where everybody can live with dignity, and we want to make a priority of those who historically have been excluded. And our slogan for this is, for everyone's well-being, we must put people living in poverty first. And the results can be seen factually. Between 2018 and 2024, more than 13 million people came out of poverty, the lowest level now of people living in poverty in our history. In Mexico and in the world, the age of women has come, and substantive equality is not negotiable. No society is democratic if we continue to have violence and gender exclusion. Mexico has placed indigenous persons and Afro-descendants at the heart of its policies, particularly recognizing the women from these communities. Working on the basis of the principle of leaving no one behind, we reiterate our commitment to the rights of persons with disabilities, of migrants, refugees, of children, and the LGBTIQ+ community. When faced with this very complex global context, Mexico makes a firm calling for tolerance and humanism. Multilateralism only has a meaning if it produces specific results, if it reduces inequality and protects human dignity with no selectivity. This Council has the responsibility of moving from simply making statements to action. We believe in a multilateralism which is based on cooperation and respect, where human rights are not used as tools for confrontation, but rather are bridges towards peace. With dialogue and humanism, we can build a fairer world. Thank you, President.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Vietnam.
Mr. President, while challenges such as armed conflict climate crisis and persistent inequalities have long confronted the international community. Their unprecedented intensity and interconnectedness today pose increasing threats to world peace and the fundamental rights of billions of people. In this context, enhanced multilateral cooperation, respect for the rule of international law, and the promotion of peace are more essential than ever for the effective protection of human rights worldwide. Countries highly value the work of the Human Rights Council, while also calling for efforts to enhance its effectiveness. Vietnam shares the expectation that the rationalization process must be comprehensive, visionary, and inclusive, enabling the Human Rights Council to better serve as a framework for dialogue and cooperation, free from politicization and interference, and to contribute to addressing the root causes affecting the full enjoyment of human rights, particularly rights related to development. We call on all states to maintain and strengthen investment in the SDGs, essential pillars for the promotion of human rights, including gender equality and the right of vulnerable groups. Mr. President, at the national level, the 14th National Congress of the Communist Party of Vietnam, held in January 2026, charted strategic orientation to 2030 and beyond. The Congress reaffirmed that the people are the center and the subject of renewal goals, national construction and development, and that every policy of the party and state must genuinely stem from the needs, aspirations, rights, and legitimate interests of the people. The respect, guarantee, and protection of human rights and citizens' rights, as well as the well-being and satisfaction of the people, are both the measure and the goal of all nation endeavors. Vietnam
would like to express its deep recognition to member states who have placed their faith in it for its 2026-2028 mandate on the Human Rights Council. This is a responsibility and an honour that we will assume with determination, in keeping with our constant foreign policy of being an active and responsible member of the international community, in particular within the Human Rights Council. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Kenya.
My delegation congratulates you, Mr. President, on your assumption of the presidency. Your leadership arrives amid a fractured international order and a deepening global human rights crisis marked by surging conflicts, economic inequities, and environmental devastation that demands our unwavering resolve. Persistent wars and instability continue to unleash grave violations, crimes against humanity, sexual violence as a weapon of war, attacks on civilians, including schools and hospitals, violent extremism, and mass displacement that tear families apart. The UNHCR's Global Trends Report warns that over 140 million people, mostly from developing nations, face forced displacement or statelessness by year's end, while UNICEF reports nearly 50 million children are at risk of being uprooted. In Africa alone, over 3 million children remain out of school, risking an entire generation. Mr. President, Kenya stands resolute in peace efforts across the region and beyond. As a major refugee hosting country, we recognize that sustainable peace is inseparable from human rights protection. We urge this Council as a vital bulwark against abuses that both spark and prolong crises, to prioritize early warning systems and ensure that it remains a platform to foster dialogue over divisions in order to prevent escalation. Mr. President, now is the hour to dismantle colonialism's shadows, xenophobia, Afrophobia, racial discrimination that still scar our world. As Chair Rapporteur of the Intergovernmental Working Group on the Durban Declaration, Kenya champions the second International Decade for People of African Descent, advancing reparatory justice and development, and in full alignment with the AU's 2026 theme, Justice for Africans and People of African Descent through reparations, echoing Africa's unyielding call for accountability. Mr. President, the right to development demands an inequitable global order. His Excellency President William Ruto continues to urge for reforms to the global financial architecture, calling for easing of debt burdens that cripple rights realization and call for structural equity in a manner that unlocks Africa's capacity for local solutions to local challenges. Mr. President, the climate crisis and the digital divide threaten rights and stability. Climate change worsens fragility in the Horn of Africa, demanding our recommitment to Paris-aligned finance and a robust loss and damage fund. As Africa's Silicon Valley, Kenya's National AI Strategy 2025 to 2030 harnesses technology to drive inclusive growth and bridge divides, ensuring AI advances equality rather than exacerbates inequalities. We believe that this Council is in a position to address access to technology as integral to Article 19 rights under the UDHR, and ICCPR prioritizes affordable, safe connectivity for marginalized communities to prevent the digital age from widening historic gaps in opportunity and empowerment. In conclusion, my delegation reaffirms that human rights remain the cornerstone of our shared humanity. Guided by our Constitution, we have set a high threshold in protecting...
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Kuwait.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to congratulate you for your election as President of the Human Rights Council, and we wish you all success in running the Council. My special thanks are due to the High Commissioner for his relentless efforts to support the effectiveness of the Council. In 2025, we have seen qualitative legislative developments in Kuwait, including the modernization of family and women legal framework, particularly when it comes to ensuring criminal responsibilities and increasing the age of marriage to 18, in addition to strengthening the rights of workers and supporting full integration of persons with disabilities, as well as developing litigation mechanisms. We have also developed all our legislative and institutional systems reflecting our practical commitment to rights and freedoms and translating our international obligations into concrete policies and measures. At the regional level, we cannot ignore the serious escalation of violations against civilians that destabilize the situation. We renew our condemnation of the Israeli violations against the Palestinian territories, Lebanon and Syria, which undermine the sovereignty of states and the security of its peoples. We reaffirm that the international humanitarian law and the international human rights law must all be respected. We also express our deepest concern over the escalating humanitarian situation in Al-Fashir city in the Sudan and the violations against civilians by the rapid support forces. Humanitarian deliveries must be delivered without hurdles. We are coinciding with this session coincides with the 20th anniversary of the Human Rights Council, which requires us to reread the human rights track at the multilateral level. The Council for 2 decades have been instrumental in entrenching important human rights and human rights protection measures. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we are looking forward to continuing our contribution to the Council through setting for the membership of the Council 2027-2029 in expression of its unwavering commitment to an international human rights track that is more balanced and effective. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Colombia.
Thank you, Chair. The world has, over the last year, veered towards open disdain of international law. We must act now in order to avert a catastrophe. Many different stakeholders throughout history have perpetrated human rights violations, but what we're seeing today is a brazen challenge to the validity of international law by the powerful. To hear that heads of states are guided by their own morality alone is a new and extremely serious situation, unprecedented since the Second World War. In the face of this reality, and in the face of those who act in this way, believing that they rule the world, well, they are digging their own grave. We must adopt extraordinary measures, not military nor economic ones, but diplomatic ones. Let us form a coalition of the human family in order to call firmly on all states to act within the limits agreed to during 80 years in order to preserve civilized coexistence between nations. This means respecting international law. On the basis of this respect, Colombia would like to reaffirm its commitment to making headway on major pending tasks, such as ensuring the peaceful settlement of disputes and giving top priority to protecting civilians. Let us fight for gender equality and for women's and girls' rights without discrimination or violence. Mercenarism is a threat to humanity. Therefore, we advocate a law against this despicable practice. Climate change requires a just energy transition, one that is respectful of the rights of all and of the world views and visions and of ancestral communities and of indigenous peoples and Afro-descendant peoples. After decades of ineffective policies, we need an approach to the issue of drug trafficking that is based on human rights, healthcare and well-being. We also believe that artificial intelligence requires governance based on equity, cooperation and human control. We are concerned for the security of human rights defenders. Many of them are victims in our territory of armed actors who are a legacy of the systematic violation of human rights in the past. Despite our efforts, they are resurfacing through drug trafficking and the illegal exploitation of mineral resources, activities which are largely driven by international demand. President, you can count on Colombia for strengthening multilateralism and the universal human rights system on the basis of international law and with the support of a robust coalition of the human family, which we invite everyone to join. Let us do so without hesitation, together, and let us do it now before it is too late. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ghana.
Mr. President, it is an honor to address this Council as Ghana concludes its current mandate as a member of the Human Rights Council and seeks re-election for the term 2027 to 2029. Ghana values the Human Rights Council as a vital forum for dialogue, accountability, and the exchange of ideas on the promotion and protection of human rights. In today's strained multilateral climate, where conflict, inequality, and geopolitical mistrust test the foundations of cooperation, the universality of human rights remain our most stabilizing anchor. Civil and political freedoms, economic, social, and cultural rights, the right to development, the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment are not competing priorities. They are mutually reinforcing pillars of human dignity. The credibility of the international system depends on our consistent defense of all rights for all people in all regions without selectivity or double standards. Mr. President, Ghana's commitment to human rights is firmly anchored in our 1992 Constitution, which guarantees fundamental freedoms, access to justice, media independence, and citizen participation in governance. We also acknowledge and appreciate the important role of civil society organizations in promoting accountability, public education, and rights awareness. Mr. President, in 2024 and 2025, Ghana undertook deliberate measures to safeguard peace and stability, particularly during the 2024 general elections. The National Peace Council implemented nationwide initiatives to prevent electoral violence, curb hate speech, and promote dialogue. Government also strengthened internal security responses and supported traditional mediation efforts in conflict-affected areas. Religious tolerance and social cohesion were further promoted through partnerships with faith-based institutions and community-level peace-building campaigns. Again, Ghana continues to integrate human rights into economic governance. Since 2023, SDG-related budget commitments have risen significantly, with priority investments in health, education, and social protection. We launched a national action plan on business and human rights, strengthened beneficial ownership transparency under the Companies Act, and adopted sustainable financing frameworks to ensure that development leaves no one behind, with particular attention to vulnerable groups. As part of our commitments to child protection and participation, Ghana hosted the 2024 Children's Model Summit, which provided children with a platform to contribute to policy discussions. Ongoing reforms include the review of child-related policies, strengthened advocacy on child protection, and regional cooperation on girls' rights. Significant progress has also been made.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ethiopia.
Mr. President, Excellencies and distinguished delegates, Ethiopia remains steadfast in its commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights, guided by the principles of universality, indivisibility, non-selectivity, objectivity, and full respect for the sovereign equality of states. As a member of the Bureau of this Council, Ethiopia is committed to contribute to strengthening its effectiveness, credibility, and impartiality. We firmly believe that genuine dialogue, cooperation, and respect for national ownership are indispensable to advancing the global human rights agenda. Mr. President, as part of its broader national reforms, Ethiopia continues to undertake comprehensive legal and institutional reforms aimed at consolidating the rule of law, expanding democratic governance, and promotion and protection of human rights. Central to our peace-building efforts is the ongoing national dialogue, an inclusive platform bringing together political actors, community representatives, women, youth, and civil society to deliberate on key national issues and forge broad-based consensus. In parallel, Ethiopia has adopted a comprehensive transitional justice policy designed to promote accountability, truth-seeking, redress, and reconciliation through nationally owned and inclusive mechanisms. In this spirit of democratic consolidation, Ethiopia is preparing for its 7th general election, scheduled for June 2026, under the leadership of the Independent National Electoral Board. Mr. President, Ethiopia firmly upholds that human rights and sustainable development are mutually reinforcing. Our homegrown economic reform agenda advances inclusive growth, poverty reduction, social equity, and job creation. Through the Green Legacy Initiative, billions of trees have been planted, strengthening environmental sustainability and intergenerational equity. Our efforts remain aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly in poverty reduction, education, health, and gender equality. At the regional level, Ethiopia remains committed to peace building and human rights governance in Africa. We uphold the principle of African solutions to African problems and continue to promote stability and cooperation in the Horn of Africa and beyond. Ethiopia values strong and effective multilateralism. We remain fully engaged with international and regional human rights mechanisms, including the Universal Periodic Review and treaty bodies, and we reaffirm our commitment to implementing accepted recommendations in a spirit of cooperation. Mr. President, Excellencies, in conclusion, Ethiopia stands firm in its resolve to advance reconciliation, democratic governance, inclusive development, and strengthened multilateral cooperation. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of North Macedonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. At its 61st session, the Human Rights Council marks 20 years since its establishment by the General Assembly. Over 2 decades, the Council has become the UN's central body for the promotion and protection of all human rights for all. It has strengthened dialogue, advanced accountability, and reinforced the universality and interdependence of human rights. This anniversary is not only a moment of reflection of the Council's achievement, but a call for renewed commitment. We meet at the time of profound global challenges: armed conflicts, humanitarian crisis, widening inequalities,
rapid technological transformation, and the escalating impacts of climate change. Ongoing conflicts continue to cause immense civilian suffering and grave violation of international law. The humanitarian situation in Gaza, Russia's continued aggression against Ukraine, the devastating war in Sudan, and persistent violation in Iran all demand our urgent attention. We reiterate that imperative of protecting civilians, ensuring unhindered humanitarian access, and guaranteeing accountability for violation of international humanitarian and human rights law. Climate change remains one of the most systematic threats to human rights, disproportionately affecting the most vulnerable and undermining the rights to life, health, food, water, and development. At the same time, emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence, are reshaping our societies. While offering a great potential, they also pose serious risk, particularly to privacy and other fundamental rights. Their development and deployment must remain fully consistent with the international human rights law. Mr. President, North Macedonia strongly supports the Secretary-General United 80 initiative, particularly its human rights cluster, aimed at enhance the United Nations effectiveness and efficient delivery. We also welcome the launch of the Global Alliance for Human Rights as a complementary effort to strengthen multilateralism and partnership among states, international organizations, civil society, and the private sector. As a diverse and multi-ethnic society, we place particular emphasis on dialogue, inclusion, respect for diversity, and the rule of law. These principles are essential for social cohesion, resilience, and sustainable peace. Marking the 25th anniversary of the Durban Declaration and Programme of Action, North Macedonia, together with Council of Europe and Ireland, will co-organize a side event entitled The Unheard 12 Million, addressing one of Europe's greatest human rights challenges. The event will focus on the human rights situation of Roma and travelers in Europe, addressing persistent discrimination, including anti-Gypsyism, and reaffirming our shared responsibility to combat racism, racial discrimination, and related intolerance. Excellency, as we commemorate 20 years of the Human Rights Council, let us reaffirm our shared responsibility to uphold human rights for all, everywhere. Let's strengthen the cooperation.
I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Gambia.
Thank you, Mr. President. This session convenes at a defining moment for our generation. From parts of Africa to the occupied Palestinian territories, from Myanmar to Ukraine and beyond, millions continue to endure armed conflict, forced displacement, and grave human rights violations. These crises remind us of the fragility of peace and the urgency of prevention, dialogue, respect for international law, and investment in post-conflict justice and peace building. In spite of current challenges to the system, multilateralism remains humanity's most vital instrument for advancing peace, justice, and prosperity. Therefore, the Gambia believes that advancing a culture of peace is essential to preventing conflict, protection of human rights, and ensuring sustainable development. It is in this spirit that the Gambia led the adoption of the Human Rights Council Resolution 5517 on human rights and the culture of peace in 2024, and we look forward to the panel discussion to be convened under this resolution on the 4th March 2026. As a member of the Human Rights Council, we also reaffirm our commitment to contributing constructively to the Council's work, including through initiatives promoting the rights of women, racial minorities, children, persons with disabilities, and older persons, whilst promoting a victim-centered accountability for human rights violations and abuses. The liquidity challenges facing the human rights system underscore the need for a collective responsibility to ensure that the Council can fulfill its mandate. However, to maintain its credibility, the Council must continue to operate with objectivity, non-selectivity, mutual respect, and respect for the sovereign equality of states. Mr. President, despite global economic growth over the past decades, inequality within and between societies remains stark. Global inequality has become a major driver of irregular migration. Therefore, addressing this problem requires tackling root causes, promoting safe and regular pathways, and strengthening cooperation based on shared responsibility and respect for human dignity. Climate change has also emerged as a profound human rights challenge, directly affecting livelihoods, food security, and the dignity of our people, despite our minimal contribution to global emissions. Therefore, climate justice and strengthening international solidarity are an imperative. While digital technologies, including artificial intelligence, offer unlimited opportunities for growth and development, unequal access and weak governance frameworks also risk deepening exclusion of millions around the world. For developing countries such as ours, the realization of human rights commitments remain closely linked to capacity and resources. Therefore, rights-based safeguards and strengthened technical cooperation are essential to ensure technological progress benefits all. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of France, with apologies for missing.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, President. I'd like to begin by expressing my solidarity for the victims of all the conflicts around our world right now. In Ukraine, where 4 years ago Russia began its war of aggression, but also in Gaza, in Sudan, in the east of the DRC, and elsewhere. We owe all these victims a clear commitment to justice and to the fight against impunity. This struggle for justice cannot exist without the crucial work of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. I commend its commitment and the commitment of its teams here in Geneva and around the world. The Human Rights Council and its mechanisms are essential for justice as they document human rights violations. That is why, on the 23rd of January, we rallied in order to renew the Council's mandates on Iran, as they must investigate the unprecedented repression that occurred against the Iranian people. I'd also like to commend the exceptional work of the Commission of Inquiry on Syria, whose work made it possible to use the 55,000 photographs leaked by Caesar as elements of proof in the context of trials, including in France. In Ukraine, the Commission of Inquiry has been meticulously documenting human rights violations and violations of international humanitarian law committed by Russia. France supports the fight against impunity everywhere, in Afghanistan or in the DRC. France has always been mobilized for the cause of the Palestinian people by refusing that warmongers prevail over peace brokers, by refusing that extremists in Israel may deny the right of the Palestinian people to stand free and upright on a land in which their roots run deep, by refusing that Hamas and its sponsors might deny Israel's right to existence and right to security. Last year, by taking the crucial decision to recognize the state of Palestine and with the Declaration of New York, France has rekindled hope, the hope that two states living side by side in peace and security, recognized and respected in their rights, is possible. France refuses and will always refuse that this hope might be weakened by hate speech. The Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs recalled this firmly following repeated and extremely problematic statements by a special rapporteur of the United Nations. All those who speak under the aegis of the United Nations, including special rapporteurs, must show restraint, temperance and discretion as required by their mandate. Ladies and gentlemen, human rights have meaning and they have a future more than ever before. In order to remain a driver of progress for the sake of freedoms, this Council, which is marking its 20th anniversary, must be modernised and become more efficient with the active participation of civil society. This anniversary, like the anniversary of the major covenants, must bring us fresh impetus in order to specifically promote the universality of fundamental free rights. That is the objective of the Global Alliance for Human Rights, led by the Office of the High Commissioner, and we commend that. True to its humanist and universal heritage, France will play a key role in this essential struggle for freedom, human dignity and emancipation. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Australia.
I'm honoured to speak to you as Australia's Special Envoy for International Human Rights. Respect for human rights is respect for each other's humanity. Yet every day across the world we see the cost of failure to respect that humanity. In December, on Sydney's Bondi Beach, 15 innocent people were murdered by anti-Semitic terrorists at a Hanukkah celebration. There is no place for hatred in Australia or elsewhere. We will do all we can to combat anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and attacks on all communities, including on our First Nations people. Regrettably, human rights situations are getting worse. Constraints on civil society are increasing, and human rights defenders, journalists and dissenting voices are being targeted. Regression in gender equality and conflict-related sexual violence is increasing. This is unacceptable. Conflict has exacerbated catastrophic human rights situations around the world, including in Myanmar, Sudan and Gaza. We call on Russia to comply with its international human rights obligations and end its immoral invasion of Ukraine. We remain gravely concerned by China's human rights violations against Uyghurs, Tibetans and the erosion of rights and freedoms in Hong Kong. Last year saw an alarming increase in executions in countries that retain the death penalty, including in Iran, which continues brutal oppression of its people. Australia has a proud record of human rights leadership in areas that I will focus on as Special Envoy, including the abolition of the death penalty and the rights of children, older persons, people living with a disability and LGBTQIA+ individuals. Friends, we will work with the international community because human rights are by definition international and because when people are marginalised or persecuted, humanity suffers. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Jordan.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السيد الرئيس أهنئكم.
Thank you very much, President. My congratulations on your appointment in this council, and we hope to work with you and the Bureau to achieve our common goals. Jordan is committed to human rights following a very ambitious program. We work with institutions, and all of our action lies at the very heart of these institutions. We commend the international community for their cooperation. This is the 20th anniversary of this council, and we call to mind the capacity building and concrete action. We also restate the importance of multilateralism, and we will always be committed to the principles underpinning multilateralism. We support the initiative of the Secretary General, UN80, and obviously we need to face the financial crisis and while not losing sight of the aspirations of young people. Also, we have to meet the challenges posed by new technologies. We commend the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and we have resubmitted our candidacy for the Human Rights Council. We will continue to work to strengthen the effectiveness of Council at a time when the world is facing very serious challenges. We need more tools than the ones we already have, and the Council plays a key role in this context. We hope to hold a high-level conference for humanity and humanism in wartime. We thank the UNHCR Secretariat.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, President. President, distinguished participants, we have a current global context where we see constant human rights violations which are simply not accessible. And at this time, it is imperative for us to restate our unstinting commitment to the promotion and effective protection of human rights. In Peru, this commitment can be seen through the constructive participation in this and in other forums which focus specifically on the promotion and defense of human rights. Obviously, this also includes implementing recommendations of the UPR, presenting periodic reports, and having a constant dialogue with special procedures. We are constantly open to regional and national human rights protection mechanisms, and we believe they make a real contribution to institutional strengthening and implementing public policy. Our public policy is focused on implementing our international obligations, for example, our national multi-sectoral policy for human rights to 2040, which was recently approved and which guides the action of our states in prevention, protection and guarantee of fundamental rights. Allow me to conclude by saying that given the current context of financial cuts at the United Nations, it is essential to protect the work of UNHCR and of the special procedures and mechanisms of this Council, because their work is key for dialogue and for accountability in the human rights sector. Peru therefore restates its adamantine commitment to multilateralism and to a solid global human rights system which is effective and sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the UNHCR.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, this year marks the 75th anniversary of the 1951 Refugee Convention. Born from the ashes of the Second World War, this convention remains the cornerstone of refugee protection. It followed states' affirmation of the right to seek asylum in the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights and gave practical effect to that right. Complemented by other human rights instruments, the convention continues to save millions of lives, ensuring that those seeking protection can find safety and live with dignity. These instruments underpin UNHCR's protection and solutions agenda, with states as indispensable partners in safeguarding rights and sharing responsibility. At the heart of the Convention lies a key protection, preventing those fleeing conflict and persecution from being sent back to a place where their life or freedom would be at risk. This is known as the principle of non-refoulement and is anchored in both international human rights and refugee law. Today, nearly 117 million people are forcibly displaced, of whom over 42 million are refugees. Many remain trapped in protracted situations, dependent on humanitarian aid without durable solutions. This is an affront to human dignity. Helping refugees achieve self-reliance is vital to UNHCR's protection and solutions mandate. That is why UNHCR aims to halve the number of refugees in protracted displacement who are reliant on humanitarian aid by 2035. This will require us all to collaborate with a broad range of stakeholders to achieve this goal. As we mark the Refugee Convention's 75th anniversary, let us honor its promise of ensuring the protection and rights of refugees, and translate commitment into actions that truly result in protection and durable solutions for those forced to flee conflict, persecution, and violence. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Germany.
Mr. President, today's threats to human rights are severe. Defending human rights is one of our most urgent priorities today, and the majority of speakers here have recognized this urgency. It is those who rely on repression and violence to stay in power that seek to undermine the human rights architecture. But when human rights, including gender equality and the rule of law, are respected worldwide, our societies are more free and more secure. The anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine is yet again a stark reminder that human rights violations do not only threaten the lives of individuals, but also peace and stability worldwide. Therefore, protecting human rights worldwide is in our own best interest as international community. Allow me to invite colleagues to consider three specific points. First, I believe states need to improve how they communicate about human rights. Benefits for our societies should be clear and tangible. It is in this regard that I welcome the High Commissioner's proposal for a global alliance for human rights. Second, the institutions that protect our rules-based international order are suffering from severe funding cuts. We need to be reliable partners and continue our support. Third, we must counter transnational repression more effectively. These actions increasingly harm human rights defenders. Germany has started to explore ways to increase the costs for those perpetrators, and we urge others to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Philippines.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, human rights, international law, and multilateralism are ramparts against our darkest impulses. They compel us to see our shared humanity and work together towards just solutions to the gravest challenges of our time. Yet today, they face the real risk of unraveling precisely when we need them the most. The Philippines stands firm with those who believe that defending the gains of the past 8 decades is both a moral exigency and a practical necessity. But this defense must encompass reforms. This task begins at home. The Philippines has established a whole-of-government coordinating mechanism to further embed human rights in governance. We are advancing comprehensive criminal justice reforms, training our law enforcement, judiciary, and armed forces on human rights and international humanitarian law, and establishing a national forensic institute. All these to reinforce the rule of law and our democracy. In this council, the Philippines leads from lived experience, empowering women, children, migrants, indigenous peoples, and older persons while advancing climate justice, among other priorities. In September 2025, we launched the Manila Declaration on Seafarers' Rights, building on the first-ever resolution on seafarers adopted by the Council in July 2024. As chair of ASEAN, we aim to enhance regional cooperation and forge just and peaceful solutions to shared challenges, including the crisis in Myanmar. Excellencies, as we seek membership in this Council for 2028-2030, we pledge to build bridges, advancing human rights through dialogue and cooperation, so that this Council remains responsive and worthy of the trust and hopes of the people it serves. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Guatemala.
Thank you very much, President. Guatemala takes the floor at this Council to restate its commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights, a central pillar of the current administration. Since the beginning of the mandate of President Bernardo Arévalo, the government has focused its action to institution building, complying with the rule of law, and recovering citizens' trust in public institutions. The approach of Guatemala takes as a starting point that democracy requires independent institutions, transparency in public office, and a firm fight against corruption and impunity. These are essential to make sure that fundamental rights are effective. Guatemala recognizes the universality, indivisibility, and interdependence of human rights, and this is why we put at the forefront the protection of defenders, journalists, women, children, indigenous peoples, and others in vulnerable situations, promoting equality and non-discrimination as guiding principles of all public policy. Consistently with the pluricultural and multi-ethnic nature of our country, we reiterate our commitment to the rights of indigenous peoples, strengthening their effective participation and intercultural dialogue. President, Guatemala restates here its openness to constructive dialogue and cooperation with global mechanisms, including this Council and its special procedures. We are of the firm opinion that international cooperation based on mutual respect and good faith contributes to strengthening our national capacities. The respect of human rights must be daily practice, and this must be reflected in budgetary decisions and inclusive public policies. Guatemala states once again before this Council its commitment to move towards a fairer, transparent and democratic country where dignity and human rights lie at the very heart of state action. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United Nations Environment Programme. Is the representative not here? In that case, I give the floor now to the distinguished representative of Sri Lanka.
Mr. President,
Sri Lanka continues its journey towards economic, social and political transformation, upholding and strengthening democratic principles, ethical governance, human rights and national unity under the theme A Thriving Nation, Beautiful Life. The government launched the Rebuilding Sri Lanka initiative aimed at inclusive and equitable growth and social protection. Last November, we faced Cyclone Ditwa, which reminded the importance of international partnerships. We are grateful to the international community, including UN agencies, for assistance and solidarity. Mr. President, reconciliation and national unity remains highest priority of Sri Lanka and firmly committed to building a society that rejects discrimination in all its forms and manifestations. Domestic institutions such as Office on Missing Persons, Office for Reparations, Office for National Unity and Reconciliation have been strengthened. Discussions are underway to formulate a TRC. Public consultations are ongoing on the draft bill, the Protection of State from Terrorism, which will lead to repeal the Prevention of Terrorism Act. Mr. President, last June, High Commissioner for Human Rights visited Sri Lanka. He gained first-hand experience on our commitments to advancing human rights and reconciliation. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sri Lanka addressed this council twice last year. He reaffirmed Sri Lanka's commitment to advancing ethical governance, national unity and reconciliation. At the last session, while opposing external action, Sri Lanka affirmed its firm commitment for guaranteeing the rights and well-being of its own people. Mr. President, we continue to stand ready to engage with this Council and the broader international community in a spirit of partnership and mutual respect. We advance on our path of reconciliation and reform through domestic processes. Understanding and support of the international community is appreciated. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United Arab Emirates.
Thank you very much, President. Our congratulations on your appointment to the presidency. And we also commend your predecessor for his work. We work to strengthen human rights, particularly focusing on women and gender equality. We wish to protect the rights of women and girls and children. We have requested a candidacy to the Council up to 2030. Human rights cooperation is based on dialogue, and we must combat extremism and hate speech. We are working for the Palestinian people and are seeing the situation worsening. And $7.5 billion will be for the Palestinians in Gaza from our state. We need authentic, strong policies, and we have also contributed to hostage exchanges with Ukraine. We can see that there are international efforts in relation to the catastrophic war in Sudan. And attempts are being made to undermine these efforts in order to settle this problem, even within this council. Thank you very much, President. I would like to ask your council to identify the main tasks for this council. There must not be any attack made against any other country. Thank you.
May the President suggest that distinguished representative of Sudan request and register for a right of reply. In this segment, we are hearing the views of member states, and as it is known, a point of order is made on a procedural matter. So let us proceed in that manner, and I request the distinguished representative of the United Arab Emirates to continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have completed my speech. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Sovereign Order of Malta.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates. For over 9 centuries, the Sovereign Order of Malta has stood at the crossroads of faith and service, guided by its motto, protection of the faith and service to the poor. Today, the Order remains steadfast in its commitment to the respect and promotion of human rights through concrete humanitarian action in some 130 countries. At the heart of our global engagement lies the defense of human dignity. Every hospital we support, every refugee we assist, every community we accompany in times of disaster reflects our conviction that human rights are not abstract principles, but lived realities rooted in the inherent worth of every person. In times of crisis, suffering is both material and spiritual. Ensuring access to freely chosen spiritual support is essential to resilience, healing, and the full respect of human dignity. In this regard, freedom of religion or belief stands as a cornerstone of human dignity. Across many regions of the world, we witness with deep concern an alarming rise in religious persecution, discrimination, and violence, targeting individuals and communities because of their faith or beliefs. Such violations fracture societies, fuel instability, and undermine peace. The Order of Malta reaffirms that freedom of religion or belief is universal, indivisible, and interdependent with all other human rights. Through interreligious dialogue and cooperation, we actively foster mutual understanding and solidarity among faith communities. In contexts of conflict and fragility, our humanitarian actors work impartially, serving the poor of all religions and none, thereby demonstrating that faith-inspired action can be a powerful force for coexistence, reconciliation, and peace-building. Human dignity must remain at the center of our shared endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Botswana.
Mr. President, as the Council resumes its 61st session, global conflicts, rising tensions, and deepening socio-economic pressures continue to undermine the protection of human rights. Conflict-related sexual violence, child recruitment, abuses against migrants and asylum seekers, and climate-driven humanitarian crises demand urgent, principled action. Botswana believes the Human Rights Council must reinforce trust, promote dialogue, and keep human rights, not politics, at the center of its work. We reaffirm our unwavering commitment to multilateralism and urge all states to honor their obligation, strengthen cooperation, and advance a global culture of peace grounded in fairness, mutual respect, and the rule of law. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Chad.
Thank you very much, President. President, allow me at the outset to commend the involvement and the commitment of all of the stakeholders who are working for the promotion and protection of human rights, who are keepers of the flame of our common goal to have a fairer world. The Republic of Chad restates here its commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights, pursuant to the constant commitment of Maréchal Idriss Ibn, our head of state. And this is an approach which is part of a sustainable, durable development plan, which is founded on the respect of fundamental rights and the consolidation of the rule of law. I also wanted to restate here our country's will to implement the recommendations that it accepted during the 4th UPR cycle and the 2 commitments that it made during the 75th anniversary of the human rights celebrations. We are committed to implementing these during 2026 and will be submitting a UPR midterm report detailing progress on all of the recommendations accepted. We have a human rights program for the period 2026-2030, and this will guide our action in the human rights sector throughout the country. This is a program which has 5 central pillars: the promotion of human rights, the protection of human rights, our gender policy, capacity building for implementation, and international cooperation. These 5 pillars have been included in the policy program of the head of state and are also included in the 2030 Chad Connection program. We are an observer to the Human Rights Council, and we are fully committed to working together with OHCHR, committed to promoting the ideals of equality for all. Thank you, sir.
To the distinguished representative of Uzbekistan.
Chairperson, distinguished heads of delegation. This year, the international community marks the 20th anniversary of the UN Human Rights Council, a key platform for international dialogue and cooperation. We also celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Declaration on the Right to Development. The reforms of New Uzbekistan have ensured a transition from declarative commitments to practical implementation. The updated Uzbekistan 2030 strategy serves as a national roadmap for achieving the UN SDGs, as said President of Uzbekistan, Shavkat Mirziyoyev. The guarantees of justice have been significantly strengthened. The protection of women and children from all forms of violence has been strengthened. The concept of freedom of conscience and religious policy has been adopted. The Civil Society Week Freedom platform was launched. Uzbekistan is developing a national program on human rights education within the framework of the 5th UN World Program. A draft of the 2nd National Human Rights Strategy until 2030 has been prepared. We have strengthened our cooperation with the Human Rights Council and its special refugees. In March, Uzbekistan will present UPR midterm report. Uzbekistan supports the Secretary General's UN80 initiatives and initiative of the High Commissioner to establish a global alliance for human rights. In this year, Uzbekistan will host the 5th Samarkand Human Rights Forum dedicated to the 60th anniversary of the International Human Rights Covenants, as well as the Global Conference of Youth Parliamentarians. We will be continuing our democratic reforms in close partnership with the United Nations, guided by the principles of dialogue, inclusiveness, and shared responsibility. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Uruguay.
Gracias. Thank you, President. Uruguay restates here its firm commitment to the multilateral system as a privileged forum for cooperation, where dialogue, mutual respect, and consensus building are key tools to tackle the shared goals that humanity faces today. We therefore view with concern the increasing questioning of multilateral fora. These are irreplaceable as fora where they can facilitate dialogue and cooperation between states. They must be preserved and indeed strengthened. In this respect, we thank and support the initiative announced by the High Commissioner for Human Rights of a global alliance for human rights. The global human rights protection system, and particularly this Council, are a pillar to strengthen standards when it comes to the promotion and protection and human rights throughout the world. Uruguay has played an active role since the inception of this body, and consistent with this procedure, it has submitted its candidacy to join the Council for the period 2027 to 29. convinced that it will continue to contribute constructively and responsibly to the work that it does. We historically have been committed to the rights of children and adolescents, and on behalf of GRULAC and together with the European Union, at this session we will be submitting a resolution on the rights of the child, focusing on the situation of children in armed conflict. We trust that we will have the support of all states in this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Morocco.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Today, more than ever, the question that we must face is how can we build on the obligations stemming from international organizations, a form of collective and concrete action in order to tackle new human rights challenges? In this spirit, Morocco would like to reaffirm its commitment to multilateralism, to the strengthening of the international human rights system. We voice our full support for the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and in particular the personal commitment of the Commissioner himself to certain issues, especially prevention, capacity building and the promotion of human rights-based approaches in public policy. True to the guidance of His Majesty King Mohammed VI and the principles enshrined in Morocco's constitution, our country is pursuing structural reforms in order to strengthen equality and fundamental rights and freedoms. It is in this vein that Morocco is continuing its efforts in order to reach consensus around fundamental standards within the Human Rights Council's mechanisms. We will soon be hosting 2 initiatives aimed at strengthening international relations, one which will be dedicated to thinking about how we can reform the universal periodic review process as we draw near to its 5th cycle, and a thematic event on the prevention of torture aimed at strengthening cooperation between national mechanisms, international mechanisms and other partners. Also, we are focused on human dignity and development in keeping with the 2030 agenda. Finally, Morocco actively supports the strengthening of women's participation in decision-making processes and in conflict prevention in an overarching policy of promoting women's leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Yemen.
السيد الرئيس تؤكد الجمهورية اليمنية التزامها الثابت.
Thank you, President. We would like to reiterate our commitment to the United Nations Charter, to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and to all international instruments to which we are a party, notwithstanding the tremendous challenges that we are facing following the putsch by the terrorist Houthi militias and the dangerous repercussions this is having on human rights and the humanitarian and economic situation. Last September, we saw attempted coup d'etat movements which were supervised by the transitional government of the south. This was dissolved and there had been foreign support for it, and this threatened Yemen's territorial integrity and sovereignty and our national acquis. We were very near the brink. Any attempt to impose political fait accompli through the use of force will only entail further violations and will undermine state institutions and will weaken human rights architecture. And without the fraternal and sincere intervention of Saudi Arabia, the unity of Yemen and its security and stability would have been under threat. We would have witnessed internal strife, which would have had a major impact on civilians and regional peace. Despite diversity, we are doing our best to reaffirm the rule of law, to support the National Commission of Inquiry into the allegations of human rights violations. We are also pursuing our cooperation with the Office of the High Commissioner and the Council itself. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
Mr. President, 1 year ago, our Foreign Minister committed before you that the systematic violations in Syria has been ended forever. Our cooperation with the Council today is cooperative and is based on national interests in order to bolster human rights concretely. The resolution on Syria that was adopted collectively here in the Council heralded a move from polarization towards cooperation. The presence of the UNHCR has been bolstered and strengthened in Syrians. We also cooperated with the Organization on Chemical Weapons. The Constitutional Declaration also prohibited torture and arbitrary detention. We have also domesticated all international instruments into legislation. A code of conduct was adopted in the military and the security forces. Decree 13 of 2026 has also adopted and entrenched the linguistic rights of the different communities in Syria. We launched a campaign to cooperate with the United Nations. We also joined an international coalition to deter ISIS, which led to the return of many innocent people. We have been cooperating with the independent inquiry commissions to for civilians to stand trial before civilian courts. The state of the rule of law is an ongoing process that requires cooperation and an end to the Israeli aggressions against our sovereignty. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Algeria.
Mr. President, we are participating in this august council, carrying a vision of a state that made human dignity the basis of its national project. This year is a juncture in the area of human rights. For instance, Law 25, 1 of 2025 was adopted to reintegrate completely the persons with disabilities in the society with comprehensive access to services. The new penal code number 2025-14 of 2025 modernized our legal framework to strengthen the procedural rights and strengthen the independence of the judiciary and unlock innovation. We believe that the right to development is a main right to restore the dignity of the human being. In this respect, the project of Ghar Lijbilat of 2025, upon the instructions of the President of the Republic, represents a model for our ambitions to convert our natural resources into an economic leverage to protect the welfare of the current and future generations. An investment forum of 2025 on trade and investment that was hosted in Algeria was aimed at the regional economic integration and ensuring the right to development as an indivisible human right. Mr. President, justice will not be served if the history of tragedies is not addressed, and this is based on the theme of the African Union this month, which calls for the reparations for African nations. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Hungary.
Thank you, Mr. President. Hungary remains a committed supporter of the multilateral system, promoting peace, security, and sustainable development. We have reaffirmed our dedication to human rights by significantly increasing our voluntary financial contributions in recent years. The protection of minority rights is a priority for us, with emphasis on mother tongue education, cultural autonomy and political representation. Hungary also advocates for freedom of religion, combats religious intolerance and anti-Semitism, supports persecuted Christian communities, and promotes a human rights-based approach that recognizes the central role of the family. Hungary is a firm supporter of peace, mutual respect, and constructive dialogue. We pay close attention to the war in neighboring Ukraine and advocate for peaceful resolution. We welcome and support the US-led peace efforts and initiatives. At the same time, the restoration of previously acquired rights of national minorities in Transcarpathia remains a high priority for Hungary. We fully support President Trump's peace plan to resolve the situation in Gaza and the broader Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It is essential that the international community unites in support of the humanitarian-centered peace plan while respecting Israel's legitimate security interests. To remain credible, the work of the Council and the conduct of mandate holders must be impartial and free from over-politicization. In this context, Hungary notes with concern that the biased and polarizing statements of the Special Rapporteur on OPT undermine the credibility of her mandate. For this reason, we share the view that her position has become untenable.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Equatorial Guinea.
Gracias. Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates, it is a great honor for me to address this Human Rights Council on behalf of the government of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea and in name of its president, Obiang Nguema Mbagozogo, in order to convey our firm determination to reaffirm our sovereign, responsible and forward-looking commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights, aware as we are of the challenges that this implies. President, following the Universal Periodic Review in 2024 and the adoption of the recommendations made to Equatorial Guinea, we have adopted a roadmap in order to implement the recommendations. The Republic of Equatorial Guinea believes in the pillars of human rights, that is to say, in the principles of universality, interdependence, indivisibility, and multilateralism, based on respect for sovereignty and for the legal equality between states. And we believe in the Human Rights Council as an intergovernmental body tasked with protecting and promoting human rights, but we expect cooperation in order to ensure correct and firm implementation of the recommendations. President, our country will continue to implement the recommendations of the Universal Periodic Review with a sense of realism, a step-by-step approach and institutional responsibility. We will continue to cooperate with the Office of the High Commission and the Council's mechanisms that support our efforts. On behalf of my government, we would like to reiterate our will to engage in open dialogue, technical cooperation and constructive commitments. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Oman.
سيد الرئيس يسرني أن أدلي بهذا البيان.
Thank you, President. I have the honor of making this statement on behalf of the Sultanate of Oman in this high-level segment. We attach great significance to cooperation with the Human Rights Council's mechanisms and the Office of the High Commissioner, and we intend to pursue this approach on the basis of our commitment to the principles enshrined in our Constitution.
The review of our national report in the context of the Universal Periodic Review reflected our positive cooperation with this mechanism in order to strengthen our national efforts aimed at protecting and promoting human rights. The United Nations is today confronted with an unprecedented situation due to the liquidity crisis that is eroding its ability to deliver on its mandate. Multilateral diplomacy is experiencing pushbacks, and certain initiatives are being launched outside of this organization, and we are seeing the right of might prevail over the might of right. This requires modernizing international institutions so that they can live up to their responsibilities in a way that is fit for purpose. Inequalities at the level of development are the source of conflicts and violations and a major obstacle to human rights. A culture of dialogue between states and among peoples is also eroding. That is why we have always defended dialogue and strove to defend it. And we also support the peaceful settlement of disputes in order to strengthen stability and prosperity in the Middle East and in the world at large. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bangladesh.
Mr. President, this is a moment of profound significance for my country. Following a national election held on 12 February 2026, a new government of Bangladesh, led by Honorable Prime Minister Tariq Rahman, has assumed office last week. This peaceful democratic transition reflects the freely expressed will of our people, as the government is committed to constitutional governance, the rule of law, and respect for human rights. Guided by the legacy of our historic struggle against injustice, discrimination, and denial of rights, this democratic transition follows a defining chapter in our recent history, the July uprising, when our citizens, particularly the youth, stood up in defense of democracy, dignity, and human rights in 2024. Our government has determined the rule of law, judicial independence, and accountable governments to be the very center of its agenda. We are committed to strengthening democratic institutions, safeguarding freedom of expressions and of the media, and fostering a political culture grounded in tolerance, pluralism, and dialogue. Mr. President, our ambitions and aspirations are, however, challenged by many external factors. First, climate change issue is such a detrimental factor that poses an existential threat to the enjoyment of human rights in Bangladesh. As one of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world, we will continue to advocate for climate justice and stronger international cooperation. Second, for years, we have provided shelter to over 1.3 million forcibly displaced Rohingya from Myanmar, despite our limited resources. We call upon the international community to intensify efforts to protect the Rohingya, ensuring accountability for atrocities committed against them, and create conditions conducive to their safe, voluntary, and dignified repatriation to their homeland in Myanmar. Mr. President, as a strong believer in multilateralism, we will continue to engage constructively with the Council and its mechanisms, including the Universal Periodic Review, in a spirit of openness, transparency, and good faith. We look forward to working with all partners to advance these shared values and to contribute constructively to the global human rights agenda. While concluding, Mr. President, let me congratulate you on your assumption of the post of the President of the Council. We reiterate our support to your work during your term of President.
Thank you. We shall now turn to the list of speakers for national human rights institutions and civil society representatives. I give the floor to the Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions.
Mr. President, we meet at a critical moment for the multilateral system. The UN is undergoing reform, recognizing that today's global challenges demand a stronger cooperation and stronger institutions and renewed trust. The Pact for the Future reflects this shared understanding. Multilateralism must be reinforced, not allowed to retreat. Yet, the pressures facing the UN system are felt far beyond New York and Geneva. When multilateral norms are weakened, the impact is immediate at the national level. It affects those responsible for implementation, monitoring, and accountability, including independent institutions tasked with upholding human rights. In this context, national human rights institutions play a vital role. NHRIs serve as a bridge between international commitments and national realities. They support the implementation in international human rights obligations and help sustain dialogue and trust in increasingly polarized contexts. The Pact for the Future recognizes the importance of effective national institutions for delivering on global commitments. For NHRIs to fulfill this role, their independence, mandates, and access to international mechanisms must be protected and strengthened, including through meaningful engagement with the Human Rights Council and wider UN system. A credible multilateral system depends not only on strong international institutions, but on strong national ones. Strengthening the UN means strengthening Paris Principle, meaning compliant NHRIs, and the people they serve. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Ingrid Liebeskind as civil society representative.
Thank you, Mr. President. The global youth unemployment rate stabilized at around 13% in 2023, according to the ILO. Yet, this apparent progress hides a troubling reality. Nearly 1 in 5 young people worldwide is need, not in employment, education, or training, with young women disproportionately affected and for whom exclusion is compounded by discrimination, early and forced marriage, unpaid care responsibilities, and limited access to the digital sectors. This is not only an economic issue, it is a human rights concern, Mr. President. We call on the Human Rights Council to act, first by systematically addressing the situation of young needs within the Universal Periodic Review, including recommendations on school-to-work transitions and access to labor markets. Second, by promoting evidence-based public policies such as youth guarantees, quality apprenticeships, investment in digital skills, and accessible public employment services. Third, by encouraging states to adopt and effectively implement legal frameworks prohibiting gender-based discrimination in employment, including equal pay and equal access to emerging sectors. Investing in young women's employment is not only about reducing unemployment. It's about advancing equality, preventing intergenerational poverty, and strengthening social cohesion. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Patricia Patton as civil society representative and to be delivered by video.
Of the Council. The rapid integration of artificial intelligence into education systems is reshaping how learning is delivered, assessed, and regulated. This moment presents significant opportunity, provided it is aligned with human rights standards and sound public policy. As education systems evolve, deliberate action is needed to ensure that innovation strengthens equal access to education. Realizing this opportunity depends on equitable digital conditions, expanding reliable electricity, connectivity, appropriate devices, and digital literacy is essential so that all learners can participate fully in instruction, assessment, and progression opportunities that increasingly incorporate automated systems. Particular attention must be given to women and girls. Closing gender gaps in digital access, skills, participation in science and technology, especially where they intersect with poverty, rural location, disability, and displacement, is central to advancing educational inclusion. This inclusive approach must guide the governance of AI systems in education. Transparency, oversight, and accountability are essential to ensure automated tools support fairness and broaden opportunity. States have clear human rights obligations. Education must remain available, accessible, acceptable, and adaptable without discrimination. With rights-based governance and international cooperation, AI can support equal access to quality education for all women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Alejandro Bonilla Garcia as civil society representative.
Thank
Thank you, Mr. President. I take the floor on behalf of the International Federation on Aging. Armed conflicts, humanitarian crises, and situations of insecurity have devastating consequences for civilian populations. Civilians are not collateral. They are rights holders entitled to protection under international human rights and humanitarian law. While all civilians suffer, certain groups face heightened risks and structural barriers. Women and girls are exposed to gender-based violence. Children are deprived of food and access to health services. Persons with disabilities encounter obstacles in evacuation. Older persons are systematically left behind, excluded from relief mechanisms and overlooked in protection responses. These are not isolated shortcomings. Persistent protection gaps undermine the rights to life, dignity and security and contribute to impunity for violations. Strengthening the protection of all civilians require addressing the specific risks faced by women, by children, by persons with disabilities, and by older persons. Efforts to strengthen international standards and implementation are essential to ensure that civilian protection is not selective, but genuinely applies to every person at every stage of life. In this spirit, we welcome and support the Global Alliance for Human Rights launched by the High Commissioner as an important step to reinforce collective commitment to the protection of current and future generations. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Runa Khan as civil society representative who will deliver intervention by video.
Climate change is not just an environmental emergency, it is the daily lived violation for many of basic rights. Working over 20 years with climate displaced communities whose homes and lands vanish underwater, whose futures are written in cycles of disaster and displacement. The poorest, the most helpless and hopeless, punished for fulfilling needs, greeds, and dreams of others. Yet they do not break. They dare to strive and hope over and over again. The Secretary General called human rights the oxygen of humanity. And I see the frontliners in shifting river islands and coastal belts in Bangladesh, which is the most populated country in the world, striving to put their heads up daily and breathe. If rights are indivisible, then dignity, health, opportunity, and hope for all living beings on this planet cannot be seen as luxuries, but essential survival tools. Understand the injustice of climate change, especially on women and children, and understand the responsibility this Council has, not for crisis management and charity, but for equity on this planet for all who breathe and live and call it their home.
Thank you. This brings us to the end of the list of speakers for the general segment. Excellencies, distinguished participants, I understand that some delegations have requested to exercise the right of reply. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba. You have 3 minutes.
Senor President, the delegation of Cuba would like to use its right of reply. We categorically reject the threats made against Cuba by Paraguay and Lithuania. Paraguay expressed a gross concern for human rights in other countries whilst passing over in silence the deep human rights violations against the people of Paraguay. Last January, the Committee of the Rights of the Child declared that the government of Paraguay was guilty of gross violations of child rights. Child sexual abuse and child ill-treatment are an emergency in Paraguay that the government there is refusing to tackle seriously. Every day, people in Paraguay fail to have access to public health care through social security. Paraguay is one of the most expensive places in the world in which to fall ill, and one of the countries where there are the most violations of the right to health. The representative of Paraguay ought to contribute to addressing the forced displacements and evictions against indigenous peoples in his country. Also, Paraguay is one of the most corrupt countries in the world, and there is evidence for this. Corruption is a systemic problem in the country that affects all strata of society. President, we are deeply concerned by the human rights situation in Lithuania, a country where harmful practices such as pushbacks at the border occur, leaving thousands of people outside of the protection of the law. The representative of Lithuania did not speak about the disproportionately high levels of social exclusion of women with disabilities, nor did he refer to the existence of problems related to child protection, including child poverty, and the need to strengthen protection mechanisms. President, if the well-being of the Cuban people is really a matter of concern to the representatives of Paraguay and Lithuania, they would have called for the end to the illegal embargo by the United States against Cuba, but there wasn't a single word about this illegal policy of blockade. Now we are seeing how this blockade is being has come back with a vengeance in order to hamper even further the rights of the Cuban people. Paraguay and Lithuania defend level accusations against the Cuban people in the Human Rights Council. This is despicable. Cuba, we are seeing that Washington has issued an order to carry out an attack against Cuba, and we are seeing that these two countries, Paraguay and Lithuania, are trying to curry favor with Washington. But we will not allow for there to be stigmatization of any kind, nor will we remain silent in the face of double standards and hypocrisy. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Belarus.
Thank you, Chair. We are using our right to reply in connection with the statements during the high-level segment by the representatives of Poland, Latvia, Lithuania and Czechia, which affected Belarus. We would like to draw attention that the aforementioned speakers elegantly remained coy about regression on human rights in their own countries. In Latvia, the situation of national minorities is continuing to worsen. It is obvious that the recommendations of the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights and the Special Rapporteur on Minorities do not worry Latvia's authorities. A similar situation is occurring in Poland and Lithuania without there being any response by the authorities to criticism from international human rights mechanisms. Systemic violations of the rights of migrants and refugees along the borders of these countries have been ongoing for years and have become so notorious that even the Committee on Human Rights has drawn attention to them. We expect results from independent and impartial investigations and that the authorities will be held to account. The people of Belarus values peace in our country and the conditions created by our government for the realization and enjoyment of human rights. Our state policy is supported by millions of citizens and hundreds of patriotically minded NGOs and trade unions who, along with the authorities, are striving to address the real problems and protect the rights of people. At the same time, we are seeing how our Western neighbours are doing all they can to undermine our stability. They are closing their borders, both to normal trade and for human movements. They have, for almost 5 years now, been using their own taxpayers' money to fund imposters and extremists who serve as mouthpieces for the policies of Vilnius, Brussels and Warsaw against Belarus. They beat and mock refugees and migrants along the border, dumping their mutilated bodies on Belarusian territory. And at the same time, they try to create loud political pretexts like filing a case before an international court or levelling baseless accusations against the Belarusian authorities here in the Human Rights Council. We call on the politicians of these countries to pay attention to the human rights situation in their own countries. It is time to abstain from megaphone diplomacy and pressure and to return to normal intergovernmental dialogue based on the principles of respect and mutual respect for the government that is recognized and was chosen by the people of Belarus. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of China.
Mr. President, Japan, Finland, Lithuania, and Australia have abused the Human Rights Council to fabricate and disseminate false information about and attack and smear China, which we strongly oppose and firmly reject. At present, Xinjiang, Tibet, and other regions enjoy sound economic development, social stability, and full protection of the rights of all ethnic groups, including the freedom of religious belief. Since the coming into force of the Hong Kong National Security Law and the National Security Ordinance, the SAR has restored stability and entered a new stage of good governance and prosperity. Countries like Japan point fingers at others' human rights situations, while Japan itself has a deplorable historical and human rights record. First, Japan refuses to reflect on its historical crimes, embarking on the wrong path of militarism. It waged wars of aggression and committed grave crimes against humanity, bringing immense sufferings to the region and world, yet has shown no genuine remorse. If Japan wishes to talk about human rights, it should begin by reflecting on its own historical crimes. Second, Japan refuses to assume responsibility for past abuses. The issue of comfort women has long been a concern to the international community. Women from China, the DPRK, Cambodia, and other countries who suffered sexual violence during World War II have yet to receive justice. Japan denies the basic dignity and rights of the victims. Its evasive and insincere attitude towards its history of aggression and atrocities raises concern. China urges Japan to do some soul-searching and properly address the legacy problems. Third, Japan disregards the concerns of treaty bodies. It claims in its statements to value women's rights, yet when the CEDAW Committee issued its concluding observations last year, expressing concern over problems such as the requirement for women to take on their husband's surname after marriage, Japan sought to obscure the matter and even retaliated by suspending its contributions to the UN in an attempt to exert pressure and create a chilling effect on UN human rights mechanisms. China urges Japan to confront the serious human rights violations faced by women and others within its own borders, reflect on its conduct, correct its wrongs, and immediately cease making irresponsible remarks about the human rights situations of other countries and stop undermining international human rights dialogue and cooperation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of India.
Mr. President, India is compelled to exercise its right of reply in response to references made to it during the high-level segment by Pakistan and the OIC. We categorically reject these allegations. The OIC, by parroting Pakistan's propaganda, only reveals how deeply it has allowed itself to be co-opted by one member, reducing itself to an echo chamber for one country's political compulsions. Pakistan's incessant propaganda now reeks of envy. We have no desire to dignify such propaganda, however, will make a few points to dismantle it with facts. Jammu and Kashmir was, is, and will always remain an integral and inalienable part of India. No amount of wishful rhetoric or audacious propaganda by Pakistan can alter the immutable fact that the accession of Jammu and Kashmir to India was completely legal and irrevocable, and in accordance with Indian Independence Act of 1947 and the international law. In fact, the only outstanding dispute regarding this region is the illegal occupation of Indian territories by Pakistan. We call upon Pakistan to vacate these areas which remain under its forcible occupation. Mr. President, it is indeed hard to take lectures on democracy from a country where civilian governments rarely complete their terms. They ring hollow. The record voter turnout in general elections and assembly elections in Jammu and Kashmir is a testimony to the fact that people of Jammu and Kashmir have rejected the ideology of terrorism and violence propagated by Pakistan and are surging ahead on the path of development and democracy. Mr. President, if the Chenab Rail Bridge, the world's highest bridge inaugurated in Jammu and Kashmir last year, is fake, then Pakistan must be hallucinating or living in the La La land. Or maybe Pakistan finds it unbelievable that the developmental budget of Jammu and Kashmir is more than double the recent bailout package they sought from the IMF. Mr. President, to conclude, despite Pakistan's efforts to destabilize the region through relentless state-sponsored terrorism, Jammu and Kashmir continues to surge ahead, politically, economically, and socially. Pakistan would do well if it focuses on fixing its deepening internal crisis than to mask them with grandstanding at such platform. The world can certainly see through its charade. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Iran.
Thank you, Mr. President. My delegation is exercising this right of reply to respond to some concerns and allegations raised about the right to peaceful protest and demonstration in Iran. Right to peaceful assembly is recognized in the Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and this right is fully respected and recognized by officials. On 28 December 2025, certain protests, mainly among bazaar merchants, trade guilds, and economic actors, started in capital city of Tehran. The protests were entirely peaceful in nature at the beginning. During first 3 days of peaceful protests, the government promptly began dialogue with the representatives of the protesters, and the president himself met with them. Economic ministers also held meetings, listened to their demands, and designed and implemented certain economic measures and reforms. However, in the second phase of the protest, new elements entered the demonstrations. At this stage, the protest moved toward violence. Unfortunately, from 8 January to 10th, we witnessed the entry of terrorist elements, armed groups, and weapons into the protest scene. It was entirely evident that the new plan had been devised to divert the protest from their original course and steer them toward violence, bloodshed, and chaos. These armed elements opened fire on police officers and civilians. In this stage, like all other countries, our security forces sought to prevent violence while acting with maximum restraint. Mr. President, in a responsible and dedicated approach, our authorities and our security forces address this challenging situation. Under the direct order of our President, independent and transparent investigating groups were formed and special platforms for submitting the protests were established. As our Deputy Minister mentioned to this Council on 23 February, Iran will seek justice for every drop of blood unlawfully shed during the recent incidents. Mr. President, Iran is a responsible and accountable country in the field of human rights, but the January incidents were not simple, peaceful protests. To conclude, Mr. President, Iran was and will be tolerant toward lawful and peaceful demonstration, and at the same time will react accordingly to violence and terrorism to safeguard the human rights of its people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United Arab Emirates.
Thank you, Mr. President. The United Arab Emirates is exercising its right of reply in response to the false and baseless accusations made earlier today by a warring party with the blood of its own people on its hands. This is merely the latest failed attempt to lecture this hall on the rule of law, while it stands accused of war crimes against its own population, and has systematically sabotaged time and time again any sincere regional and international effort to achieve a diplomatic solution to the conflict. With a calculated indifference to the suffering of the Sudanese people, it has committed documented human rights violations and violations of international humanitarian law, systematically obstructing humanitarian access, attacking civilian infrastructure, carrying out summary executions, and sexual and gender-based violence. The very representative accusing my country has failed to ensure impartial investigations or any real accountability. Not to mention the factual links to extremism towards this warring party, which is extremely worrying for my delegation and for the international community as a whole. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Turkey.
Mr. President, we categorically reject all the unfounded allegations against Turkey, which are devoid of historical and legal facts, and would like to remind that the only occupation on the island is the occupation by the Greek Cypriots of the seat of the government of the 1960 Republic of Cyprus. It should be recalled that the Cyprus issue started in 1963, not in 1974, when the Greek Cypriot side forcibly usurped the title of the 1960 Partnership Republic of Cyprus and expelled the Turkish Cypriot partner from all state organs through force of arms. Following the coup in 1974, guarantor Turkey's rightful and legal intervention in accordance with her rights and obligations under the Treaty of Guarantee, saved the lives of Turkish Cypriots. In fact, the Greek Cypriot side is also well aware that the intervention of guarantor Turkey brought peace and security to the island in 1974 by putting an end not only to the violence and massacres inflicted against the Turkish Cypriot people, but also to the same acts committed by the Greek Cypriot militia against its own people. The legality of the Turkish intervention of 1974 has been underlined by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe in its resolution 573 adopted in 1974. It is also crucial to underline that none of the United Nations Security Council resolutions on Cyprus describes the legitimate and justified Turkish intervention as invasion or occupation. For the Turkish Cypriot side, the tragedy of missing Turkish Cypriots dates back to 1963, long before the Greek Cypriot side. The Turkish Cypriot side does its utmost on this humanitarian issue affecting both sides. Mr. President, the existence of two distinct peoples and states on the island of Cyprus, each governing themselves and exercising exclusive sovereignty over their respective territories, is an undisputable fact today. In the light of this reality, the only way to reach a sustainable agreement on the island is through acceptance of the fact that two separate and independent states exist on the island and that these two states have sovereign equality and equal international status. Lastly, the Turkish Cypriot people are regrettably still subjected to human rights violations, unjust restrictions, and are being denied of their rightful representation and participation in international fora. We are calling upon the international community to lift the unjust isolation of the Turkish Cypriot people, recognize their inherent rights of sovereign equality and equal international status so that they can take their rightful place on international platform. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cyprus.
Thank you, Mr. President. Cyprus exercises its right of reply in response to the statement made by the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkey during the high-level segment. Turkey's continued occupation of the northern part of Cyprus since its illegal invasion in 1974 remains a flagrant violation of international law, including Security Council resolutions and binding international agreements. This occupation infringes upon the human rights of all Cypriots, both Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. The illegality of such aggression was affirmed inter alia by the UN Security Council resolutions 541 and 550, which also condemn all secessionist actions. The European Court of Human Rights additionally confirmed that, through the presence of 34,000 troops, Turkey exercises effective control over the northern part of the island, occupying 36.3% of the Republic's territory, and has consequently been found responsible for numerous violations of human rights. The occupation has resulted in the forced displacement of thousands of Cypriots and the usurpation of their properties. One of the most tragic consequences of the Turkish invasion is the missing persons. At the same time, Turkey has pursued a systematic policy of colonizing the occupied areas by facilitating the influx of settlers with the aim of altering the island's demographic character and cultural heritage. Turkey's control extends beyond military presence, encompassing direct political influence, economic dependency, and demographic manipulation through the settlement policy. The notion of the so-called isolation of the Turkish Cypriot community is a direct consequence of Turkey's actions. The ongoing division of Cyprus stems directly from Turkey's military occupation and the illegal unilateral declaration of the so-called TRNC. The Turkish assertions constitute a propaganda plot to divert attention from its responsibility for the violations in occupied Cyprus. Turkey's claims on behalf of the Turkish Cypriots have been repeatedly rejected by the international community and competent judicial bodies. My government remains steadfast in its efforts to reunify our country for the benefit of all Cypriots. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Lithuania.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm exercising this right of reply in response to the statements made by the delegation of Belarus and Cuba. I would like to point out that Lithuania takes its international obligations very seriously. We are committed to the protection of refugees, especially those escaping conflict and persecution in their countries of origin. However, we will not tolerate the instrumentalization of migrants for political purposes. There is a clear distinction between regular and instrumentalized migration. Belarusian authorities are directly involved in organizing artificial flow of irregular migration with the aim to exert political pressure on its neighbors. Belarus deliberately and inhumanly put the lives and well-being of migrants in danger, including women, children, and those persons in vulnerable situations. Belarus' facilitation of mass illegal migration is a direct affront to principles of sovereign equality, territorial integrity, and non-intervention in the domestic affairs of other states. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. The DPRK delegation would like to exercise its right of reply to the statement delivered by Estonia, Lithuania, ROK, and Japan, which we categorically reject. Year after year, the Western countries make groundless assertions about the so-called human rights situation in my country, while the grave human rights violations of international concern occur on a daily basis in their own societies. The countries who have pointed finger at us are without exception the main perpetrators of human rights violations, such as forced labor, sexual violence, and cruel treatment of immigrants and police violence. These countries do not have the basic qualifications to talk about the human rights. It is an extreme manifestation of hypocrisy and deception. They have neither the moral standing nor the legitimacy to point their finger at others. Their interest in the human rights issue is not out of genuine concern for the protection and promotion of human rights, but from their political purpose of undermining the dignity of foreign sovereign states with different ideologies and systems. The state and social system of the DPRK enjoys absolute support and trust of the entire Korean people, as it directs and subordinates all its efforts to safeguarding the true dignity and the rights and interests of its people and promoting their peaceful life and welfare. It is quite absurd that the ROK that remains subordinate and fails to utter even a single word of protest over the human rights violations suffered by its own people at the hands of foreign troops, speak of human rights issues of others. It would rather pay attention to the human rights situations within its own territory. We have neither the need nor the will to sit down with the ROK to discuss any matter whatsoever. Regarding the abduction issue alleged by the Japanese representative, we have already clarified our position on several occasions that it had already been settled irreversibly and completely through our sincerity and efforts. Nothing to further to investigate or explain about. Instead, Japan should sincerely apologize for the grave crimes against humanity it committed against the Korean people during the period of colonial rule. Japan must bear in mind that the more it persists in such behavior, the more it will remain in the international community as a shameless nation devoid of moral conscience, only adding to the burden of its historical crimes. Mr. President, the DPRK remain invariable in its position to safeguard the socialist system, the living ground for the true life of its people, and will continue to join the international community in its endeavors for promotion and protection of genuine human rights. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sudan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm exercising my right of reply to the statement of the representative of the Authority of Abu Dhabi. His Excellency, the Minister of Justice of the Sudan, in his statement referred to the state that sponsors the rebellious militia in my country and supporting it with weapons. And this is not a mere accusation, Mr. President. It is a well-known fact that is predicated on a number of evidence and documented proofs, including the report of the United Nations mission on Sudan. A document, an official document of the Security Council dated the 15th of January 2024, and you can refer to that document. In that report, there was a reference to the lines of transferring weapons from Abu Dhabi International Airport. It was based on clear-cut evidence, in addition to other reports of major international organizations, in addition to the other the reports of the well-known organizations. In my country, the National Commission of Inquiry has also provided sufficient evidence. We have submitted a number of complaints with proofs to the Security Council of the proven sabotage by Abu Dhabi Authority. It is paradoxical that the same authority that is sponsoring a criminal militia that the whole world is seeing and is attesting to its crimes are now talking about peace in the Sudan. Peace is a noble value that you have to be full of peace before you talk about it. Mr. President, the people of the Sudan is only requesting this country to stop sponsoring this criminal militia that is killing the innocent people of my country on a daily basis. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are exercising a right of reply in response to the statement by the Indian representative, which was devoid of facts and part of the misleading narrative that India is peddling against Pakistan shamelessly for decades. Mr. President, historical facts cannot be changed by hollow claim and charged rhetoric, nor can they be reshaped by distortion and repeating falsehood. The reality is that Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is a disputed territory, and it will remain so till its final resolution as per the aspirations of the people of Kashmir and in accordance with the UNHCR resolutions. No unilateral action ever can change the disputed nature of the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. During the last 78 years, Mr. President, India has committed worst human rights violations in the occupied territory. There is a plethora of reports, including by the UN mechanisms, reflecting widespread and systematic human rights violations in Jammu and Kashmir. Thousands of Kashmiri women have been subjected to rape, children abducted, youth detained, tortured and killed, political leadership imprisoned, and independent voices silenced under severe repression and prolonged communication blackouts. Let me remind India that while their brutality may delay justice, it cannot defeat it. Mr. President, frustrated by the indomitable courage and resilience of the Kashmiri people, the Hindutva regime of India has resorted to a malicious campaign of altering the demography of the region by allowing non-Kashmiris to obtain Kashmiri domicile with a view to eventually turn Kashmiri Muslims into a minority. This too will fail. as no electoral gerrymandering can manufacture consent. Mr. President, India's active support for terrorist groups in Pakistan is well known. It continues to sponsor terrorist attacks targeting Pakistani civilians and security personnel. Mr. President, its extraterritorial assassination campaign in many other countries around the world is also a matter of record. Mr. President, we call upon the international community to take cognizance of India's illegal actions and hold it accountable for its blatant disregard of human rights of the Kashmiri people and its support for terror networks and infrastructure in our region and beyond. I thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Japan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our delegation would like to exercise its right of reply in response to the statements made earlier by China and North Korea. Regarding matters related to history, every country and region should approach its own past with humility and engage with it sincerely. Japan has done so diligently, and the post-war trajectory of Japan as a peaceful nation is a testament to this commitment. For over 80 years, since the end of the war, Japan has consistently upheld democracy and human rights, contributing to peace and prosperity in the Asia-Pacific and beyond. The claims cited by North Korea concerning Japan are unfounded assertions. In addition, claims cited by China that Japan is exhibiting militaristic tendencies or seeking to deny or distort this history are completely unfounded. China has made criticism regarding the rights of women and girls in Japan. Japan actively promotes the rights of women and girls both domestically and internationally. We also believe that any consideration of our national systems should proceed with the understanding of our people. Regarding the abduction issue by North Korea, Japan's position was outlined earlier today by our delegation, and I will not repeat it. However, we once again strongly urge North Korea to ensure the immediate return of all abductees. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. My delegation wishes to exercise the right of reply to the statements made by the delegation of the DPRK. As my Vice Minister indicated in her remarks, Korea's democratic institutions have demonstrated resilience through the rule of law and civic participation. The Republic of Korea, as a member of the Human Rights Council, firmly opposes the values of human rights and democracy and remains committed to promoting and protecting the rights of all people. While taking notes of the DPRK's participation in its CRPD review and its fourth cycle UPR, we encourage the DPRK to cooperate fully with the UN human rights mechanisms and, through such cooperation, pursue in good faith policy and institutional reforms to bring about tangible improvements in the human rights situation of its people. We once again reaffirm our consistent openness to dialogue aimed at resolving humanitarian issues between the two Koreas, including those related to separated families, abductees, detainees, and prisoners of war. We sincerely call upon the DPRK to respond positively without delay. I thank you.
Thank you. I understand now that the distinguished representative of Cuba has requested for a second right of... No. Okay. My apologies. The representative of the United Arab Emirates have requested for a second right of reply. I now give you the floor, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, President. I will be brief this time. Mr. President, a party that allows atrocities against civilians and acts of brutality against women and girls cannot credibly claim to speak in the name of civilian protection, justice, or international law before this Council. While it enables impunity and atrocities on the ground, the Port Sudan Authority has disqualified itself from any moral authority to lecture other countries and the United Nations while such crimes are committed under its watch. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the representative of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea for its second right of reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. As we are deeply concerned that some interventions have repeatedly misrepresented the name of our state, this is by no means a trivial matter. Correctly referring to a state is a fundamental expression of respect for sovereignty and a basic diplomatic norms that the Human Rights Council must uphold. Ignoring this undermines the credibility and fairness of the Council and reflects political bias and deliberate disparagement. Repeated misnaming is a mere mistake. It can only be seen as an attempt to use the Human Rights Council as a political instrument. Therefore, we call for Chair to ensure that all delegations strictly adhere to the Council's rules and procedures. And as we have already clearly stated our position in exercising our right of reply at the first round, we do not consider it worthwhile to comment further. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of China for its second.
Mr. President, China upholds constructive dialogue with all parties on the basis of equality and mutual respect. We are firmly opposed to politicization, weaponization of human rights, and using human rights as an excuse to interfere in the internal affairs of other countries. And we oppose the double standard of making irresponsible remarks at other countries while ignoring their own human rights abuses. The remarks by Japan just now again proves its complete lack of remorse for its historical crimes and human rights abuses. Escaping its responsibilities, it has never made real remorses. The international community should remain highly vigilant and oppose it together. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Japan for its second right of reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. My delegation would like to exercise the second right of reply to the statement made by China. Regarding a historical issue, we will not respond to each of them in detail at this time. However, we believe that many countries in this assembly recognize that Japan has consistently pursued the path of a peaceful nation since the end of the war, making significant contributions to global peace and prosperity, including through development cooperation, peacekeeping operation, and efforts to improve human rights and universal value. Japan intends to continue contributing to peace as a responsible member of the international community. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Armenia in exercise of the right of reply. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the floor. We want to exercise our right of reply to the statement delivered by the OIC during high-level segment. We wish to underline that peace has been established and stability continues to be maintained on the ground. In this regard, we encourage that statements delivered from high-level platforms be based on updated and accurate information reflecting current realities. Armenia rejects allegations concerning our region that do not correspond to the situation on the ground and that risk undermining the established peace. We call on all partners to refrain from unilateral statements and to contribute constructively to efforts aimed at consolidating stability and advancing sustainable peace. I thank you.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished participants, before closing this meeting, we should take a few minutes to deal with some organizational and procedural matters. The first is on program of work. You will recall that at the organizational meeting on February 9, we discussed the draft of program of work for the 61st session of the Human Rights Council, this session. A revised version of the program of work dated 16 February was distributed to delegations and has been posted to the extranet. I understand that the program of work can be approved as it stands, on the understanding that it is a dynamic document and that adjustments can be made throughout the session. If I hear no objection for this purpose, I will declare the program of work of the 61st session of Human Rights Council adopted. It is so adopted. Turning to the list of speakers and speaking time, Excellencies, distinguished participants, I would like to remind you that the online registration system for the list of speakers for interactive dialogues, general debates, and panel decisions opened on Monday, 16 February at 2 p.m. and will close 2 hours before the meeting in which each debate is scheduled to start. The list of speakers will be closed approximately 15 minutes after the start of each debate, dialogue, or panel discussion. Online registration for list of speakers for the adoption of the UPR outcome documents will be open from Monday, March 9 at 9 a.m. to Thursday, March 12 at 6 p.m. No registration will be possible after this date. Speaking times will be the same as at previous sessions. Lists of speakers will be available on the Council extranet and will be updated regularly during each debate. Now turning to draft resolutions, may I remind you that the deadline for submission of draft resolutions is Wednesday, 18 March at 1 p.m. Any request for extension would be approved by the Council only under exceptional circumstances and for a maximum of 24 hours. I would also like to take this opportunity to remind you that the late submission of draft resolutions, as well as the high number of oral and written revisions, complicates the work of many delegations. In addition, the late submission of draft resolutions prevents the Secretariat and conference services from translating the text into all languages and make it very difficult to produce program budget implications. Similarly, let me remind you that in order to facilitate the work and performance of the interpreters, delegations are asked to provide a copy of their speeches in advance, either by uploading them onto the online system or by providing a hard copy to the conference service. Finally, delegations are asked to upload an electronic version of their speeches via the online system for registering on the list of speakers so that they can be posted on the Council extranet. Speeches must be uploaded in Word format to improve accessibility for persons with disabilities. Please note that speeches in uploaded in a non-accessible format will not be posted on the extranet. Excellencies, distinguished participants, colleagues, I would like to stress that the United Nations, including this Council, and I trust all of us, have zero tolerance for any form of harassment, including sexual harassment. All complaints will be dealt with promptly. Like all of you, as President, I can assure you that I will follow up on all allegations that I may receive concerning acts of reprisals and intimidation committed against persons because of their participation in the work of the Human Rights Council, its mechanisms and procedures. So I invite all delegations to be with the President on this matter. Excellencies, distinguished participants, this brings us to the end of this afternoon's meeting. We will reconvene tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. We'll reconvene tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. and hold enhanced interactive dialogue on the report of the Special Rapporteur on Afghanistan and the OHCHR country report, followed by enhanced interactive dialogue on human rights in the Sudan. I hereby close the 7th meeting of the 61st session of the Human Rights Council. The meeting stands adjourned. Enjoy your evening. For those who are fasting, enjoy your fast break, and the rest of you enjoy your dinner. Thank you.